Your Audi enjoys reading fan theories about Severance on Reddit. Your Audi watched all of season 2 and cried at the finale. Your Audi enjoys watching YouTube videos where random people discuss season 2 of Severance. Please try to enjoy each fact equally.
Yes, and welcome to We Are Not Alive. Please try to enjoy each video equally.
The thing about Severance is, when we watched season 1 and made our Patreon about it, it felt like we were like the proud few screaming about the show in a relatively uncaring crowd.
It feels like the Squid Game of this year.
It's a really popped off. And I'm thrilled because as I mentioned in the Patreon we did about Severance, I actually have I have a mutual friend, a really close mutual friend with Dan Erickson, the show's creator. And it's really cool that this show has, happened this way for him. And he's a really excellent writer. It's a really great show. But it's been really surreal watching, like, it's a huge, there's memes, there's, TikTok trends. Like, the bit I was doing at the beginning, the Your Audi, is, huge videos on, Instagram and TikTok. I was walking with my roommate in, the downtown area near our apartment, and there was a bar that had put the posters of Miss Casey, the, missing posters of Miss Casey in the window of the bar.
Given that this, premise is so inventive, so interesting. This feels like a modern sci-fi show that is going to go on and influence a lot of things in whatever society remains in our future. That much is uncertain.
When Lost was in its heyday, I was a bit too young to be invested in Lost as it was airing. But a couple of my friends who are a little bit older than me were talking about how, the way that folks are talking about Severance reminds them of the way folks were talking about Lost, which is, this weekly release show with a lot of mysteries, a lot of theories, just a lot of really juicy stuff to dig into.
Well, I think that's an interesting endpoint when it comes to the way that Severance is being discussed, because for a lot of people, it is this mind-bending, interesting, fascinating show that you tune into to dig into these deeper questions that don't really even get resolved yet. We're still barely scratching the surface of all of the ethical issues that would come up with exploring a premise like this. But to some people, it is a withholding show that offers no answers and is baffling and labyrinthian and too confusing for its own good. But these two versions of Severance exist side by side because they're the same show.
Well, and also something I love, I was actually just reading a thread on Blue Sky. Get into it, folks. It's the non-Elon Musk website. Anyway, I was reading a thread on Blue Sky from a TV writer that I follow who was talking about, I'm sort of seeing this pattern replicated again. Stick with me here. She was talking about how in 2020, when she was trying to sell shows, everyone was being told by executives that networks were looking for the next Ted Lasso. They were like, we're looking for comfort food TV right now. People don't want to feel sad. People don't want to feel freaked out. Yeah. It's a pandemic. And then the biggest show in the world was Squid Game.
Yes, no, it's true.
And then with this, there's been this thing that I've been told by a couple of my writer friends that executives keep saying, oh, nobody wants to buy anything with a point of view right now. And then cut to the biggest show I can think of right now being Severance, a show with a very distinct and interesting point of view. It's so funny. In both, it's encouraging because audiences are always smarter, I think, than we think they are. And also, it's encouraging because it's a reminder that executives are often wrong.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. In the same way, and this is no shade, I enjoyed parts of, the later seasons of Ted Lasso.
Oh, I actually quite like Ted Lasso.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's got promise all the way through. The first season, I think, was my favorite season.
It's the best season.
I think that in the same way that Game of Thrones was this, the hunt for the next Ted Lasso is disproven by the way that the show itself went on. Where it's just
yes.
The buzz of this, the lightning that was in this bottle is going to get let out at a certain point, and you can't recapture that because even the show itself couldn't necessarily keep that fervor, keep that energy.
Yeah, eventually the lightning in that bottle flickers out, and that's fine. It's trying to chase the same thing. It's sort of this is a funny analogy, but I used to be told this a lot by my voice teacher when I was in theater school, is he was talking a lot about the folly of trying to imitate what made other people successful is he was like, you never want to be the next somebody, you want to be the first you. And I think that's the case with a lot of pieces of art. Like, shows that are trying to chase other things are always going to feel like cheap knockoffs of those things. It's better to make the weird thing that speaks to you, because if it hits, sometimes it hits just right. And Severance is a really great example of like an artist who made the weird thing that spoke to him, and it spoke to a fucking lot of people.
Yeah, and there is no doubt that we are going to get things that are like trying to be like this, but this is going to be the one that was like the trendsetter, and the one that is going to be remembered at like in the survivorship bias of the future.
And I have to say this before I get bitter about people making really ridiculous fan theories about the show. I have to say, I have to say the good thing, which is that it's been a really lovely reminder as someone who loves storytelling and loves art and has worried about like declining like media tastes and literacy and stuff, that audiences are still really hungry for something challenging. Its popularity shows that even for people who don't get it, even for people who I think watch it quote unquote wrong, it still is a great example that people do want stuff that challenges them.
Yeah, and like to go off of what you were saying about like, you know, the people making up like the craziest theories out there and like coming up with these wild headcanons about the show, I think that there is a place for that, but I do want to caution people who are in that space that it should go hand in hand with an acceptance that the show will take a different path. So embracing like fan fiction and your own personal like kind of like, oh, what if the show was this? And like, you know, having AUs, that's not a dirty word. That's not like a bad place to be. Canon isn't the be all. Like the bounds of canon are not the bounds of your imagination. That's what I need these people to know.
It's also awesome with a show like this that is using so much deliberate symbolism and foreshadowing, and where nothing is wasted. It is awesome to formulate theories, and it is
absolutely
so like, and they clearly want that, you know, like it's like Lost. It's like that they want, or Yellow Jackets, another mystery box show that I really enjoy. They want people to like dig in and pick it apart.
Definitely.
I always want to encourage, because I've seen some stuff that's made me mad, and then we'll talk about the season itself. I've seen some stuff that pissed me off, and I'm like...
some real broken brains. Like, this show is not just severing its characters into two, like, different distinctive peoples. It's severing the minds and brains of people so that they're saying all sorts of things that they don't know.
Your Outie writes wild shit on Reddit. I'm gonna say two things really quickly, and that is, one, a lot of people didn't like episode 7, I think because a lot of Redditors didn't like to have to look at an older woman for that long. And two, there's this weird thing I see happen in digital spaces where fans will take on so much sense of ownership of a piece of art that they are theorizing about, or making AUs or fanfic in their head about, or again, making these theories and these big kind of grand interpretations about, where they start to feel like they can do it better than the show's writers. And maybe sometimes that's true, but a lot of the time, I have to emphasize, I'm like, you're playing with dolls in a dollhouse that those writers made for you.
Yeah, like it is so like silly to me that people are like, yeah, I could decide the direction of this. I know where it should be going, when it's like you're really only seeing the surface of the whole thing.
And also, like, you only know you only have the idea, like, and again, this isn't saying like, oh, TV writers are like faultless gods that are like infallible and never fuck up. They do. A lot of people didn't like the ending of Lost, or a lot of people didn't like the ending of Game of Thrones. But I think it's more just like, the way that people don't engage with the reality that like, I'm like, the only reason you're able to even consider where the show would go is because someone else made the show.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like these people treat like the existence of further serialization as the largest plot hole ever. And it's like, yeah, we're not there yet. We're not at the end of the show. Clearly there is more to be explained. It is in the future of the show. That's not a plot hole. We're just not there yet.
That's just pacing. This is a larger video to make, Gus, but people don't know what a plot hole is, and it makes me insane. Like, a plot hole isn't the author deliberately not telling you all the information.
I don't want to be like, well, okay, I'll be a little uncharitable for a second, but like, a plot hole is not is also not, I was looking at my phone during that part, but I'm gonna like write about it on Reddit anyway because I didn't pay attention to this line or this scene.
I am going to say something. I'm going to be a little rude. I'm going to be a little snarky before we talk about how good this season was and our thoughts about the season. I do see some fan theories that make me crazy. And one of the ones that I saw that made me be like, I had to literally click off the thing because I wanted to go, are you dumb? Was someone was like, Irving was never severed in the first place. He's always been reintegrated. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense if you watch any of the show. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Like, that is anticipating a twist so much that you incorporate the twist into what's already... Like, you're retconning the events of the show in your brain to fit a twist that doesn't happen.
Because I'm like, did you watch season 1? Where he was so bought into Kier and we watched him sort of slowly learn about the outside world and break himself out. Like, it's
But Addison, if he's not reintegrated, how could he drive a car? How come he drive car? Yeah.
What's muscle memory?
Exactly.
I love people who get so lost, and by love I mean they make me crazy. People who get so lost in the theory sauce that they start to like devalue the storytelling of the actual show. Like,
yes,
what if all the stuff from Irving's character arc didn't matter and had no impact at all?
Yeah, exactly.
What if it didn't matter at all? Because I think twists are the epitome of good writing. What if that happened?
Well,
like, oh no.
It's the kind of people who think that show don't tell means I don't really need to pay attention to the dialogue, only the outcomes and events of things.
But even the outcomes and event, that was the particular theory that made me feel the craziest because it was the one like so most readily disproven by just watching the show.
Yeah. Like,
watching the events on screen.
Yeah, so we'll get into spoiler territory real quick, but yeah, broadly I agree with you that like these are people in Plato's cave who are like sticking up their two fingers and putting bunny ears on the shadows and thinking that they've added value to the show. It's just not the case.
However, though, like I said, on the other side of things, it is a show that rewards paying attention.
Being an attentive viewer it often translates to being a charitable viewer because you're actually appreciating what is coming before you.
Yes, I'm going to say some quick non-spoiler thoughts before we get into spoiler-heavy territory, which is just, I think that the tone of this season, for better or for worse, I think for the most part it worked in its favor, is a lot heavier, is a lot darker, a little bit less of the dark comedy tone of this first season, and a little bit more veering into just sort of settling into how bleak the implied world of the show is. I think we get some incredible performances like in the first season, especially the standout for me of season 2 is Tremel Tillman as Mr. Milchick. I think he does some unbelievably brilliant, subtle work that lends this incredible, like, this inner life to Milchick that we like. He can inject so much meaning into the smallest of facial expressions, the smallest of fluctuations in his vocal cadence. I think he does some incredible fucking work in this show, especially in this season. I think also Britt Lauer does some unbelievable, subtle, phenomenal work in this season.
She's incredible considering, like the whole cast is incredible considering, like, many of them are playing double duty as their outies and innies, but Britt Lauer in particular is so fascinating in the nuances of her performances between Heliar and Helena.
This season, like its first season, did a really great job with subverting expectation, but not in a way that felt too, like, ha, tricked. Like, again, it rewarded paying attention.
Yeah.
But there were still enough surprises and enough questions, and I thought it was paced out and, like, bits of information being fed to you in such a way that, like, we learned something new every episode, but never enough to know, to feel fully on solid ground.
Yeah, like, this was all just kind of a big, grim puzzle that didn't, like, there are moments where, like, the season 1 energy kind of peeks through, especially in the finale, felt very like, okay, we're back to familiar elements with new knowledge. But I think that, like, the main thing that this was trying to do is it's like we are advancing the story now, we are advancing the character, we're focusing on, like, the dark implications of this premise, and if you want the, like, upbeat kind of silly, goofy, this is so weird and mind-bending energy of season 1, that's what season 1 is for. That's why it exists. And this makes season 1 more special in its own way.
Does. And I'll say, my last thing I'll say before we get into spoiler territory, because I want to talk spoiler heavy with you about this season, is I think that if I had to put one of the primary themes of this season into a single sentence, it would be a phrase that I have been repeating ever since I saw The Substance, which is, remember, you are one.
Ooh, lots of fun toying with identity and
yes.
ourselves.
All right, spoilers ahead.
Yeah.
Spoilers ahoy. I was just reading, again, I follow a lot of other writers and a lot of critics on Blue Sky, and I was reading a really fabulous post that was no spoilers, but like we're talking about this in a spoiler context, that was talking about the ways that particularly Dylan, Mark, and Helly's story arcs in season 2 play with the different ways that we can relate to the self in terms of self-loathing, self-actualization. Like Dylan got a beautiful bit of self-actualization from his Audi at the end in the finale. Oh, that letter made me cry.
I could never predict where that subplot was going, but like in its entirety, it is so like fascinating.
And Audi Dylan, his response to that gave me this feeling of like, it was the reminder that the Audis and the innies are frequently, in a lot of ways, in terms of their inherent traits, they don't seem to be different from each other.
But their environment shapes a lot of the way that they behave and how those traits are expressed.
But at the end of the day, it's funny, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about all three of them now. Dylan is more capable as his innie because he's not had a world beating him down to make him feel like he's not. But he and his Audi are both kind of brash and impulsive, but at their core, they're these very kind and like empathetic people. I think that Irving and his innie and Audi got closer and closer and closer toward the end of his arc as an innie. Mark's innie and Audi are obviously quite different circumstantially, but also we saw a lot of Mark's especially negative traits mirrored between his innie and Audi in the finale, with his sort of, his sort of selfishness, his sort of decision to prioritize the temporary comfort over like long-term good. Like the same decision that led Audi Mark to sever is the decision that led innie Mark to abandon Gemma.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about both sides of Mark, like the innie and Audi side, is that they have almost switched sides ethically in like where their like passions are leading them. Like, cause we're in this very strange state of like, obviously the main metaphor of the show is like a work-life balance and how Severance is supposed to be the cure for that, but actually kind of deepens the divide between the parts of us that are useful to capital and the owning class and the parts of us that like we want to preserve and keep from being used by anyone. It's interesting that Audi Mark has gone from like, Severance is like the thing that like saves me, it's the thing that like preserves me, it's what I want, and innie Mark being like confused about like, well, the Severance thing means that people have total control over me. And now through the events of this season, we get an innie Mark who is like, I want to preserve Severance at all costs because it is the thing that keeps me alive, and Audi Mark being like, but everything real I had was sort of taken from me with Severance. So I think what this breaks down into is that the Severance metaphor is not as simple as just a like workers cast off your oppression. It's more like, I think what it gets into is a kind of like capitalist realism where it's like, who are we when we're removed from the current system? Like, what do we have left? Sort of thing.
There's just, it's really juicy. I don't know why that's the word I decided to use, but it's also because as much as it's an exploration of society, it's also, and those things, it is also very much an exploration of our relationships, the relationship to the self and the nature of identity, right? I'm so compelled and fascinated by, I am so fascinated by the Helena divide because like I was saying about like, Mark is self-destructive in every conceivable version of that word, almost. Whereas, like I said, Mark's gone through this sort of arc of self-destruction or this sort of this sort of adversarial relationship to the self. Dylan's kind of achieved this peace with the self and this self-actualization, and that gave him the strength to help Helly in the finale. And then Helly and Helena, it's so fun. I don't know how to phrase this, which is that Helly and Helena have one thing in common, and that's that they both hate Helena.
Yes! Yeah, no, that's so true.
Because Helly hates Helena and Helena hates herself. The fact that she was faking like that, and not just faking, as we now really understand, she wasn't just faking it to like be sneaky, but because she wanted a chance to not be herself is so interesting. But she wanted a chance to not be herself and be aware of it, not just to sever like that, but to like the bit I love. I also, by the way, speaking of it being a show that rewards you for paying attention, I clocked the Helly Helena thing like earlier in that episode during a couple different parts. In general, I'm going to talk more about Britt Lauer's performance, but the bit with Mark in the tent where she says, "I didn't like who I was out there."
That's true.
I was like, that's not Helly. That's Helena being honest for the first time in her whole life, pretty much. She's in a cage, but she's free. And there we go. It's all so fucking fascinating, right? Like,
And I think, like, that whole subplot between, like, you know, Mark and Helena and Helly, that whole, like, entanglement that they get into it's so fraught. It's so, like, disturbing.
And I hate Helena, but I also love her. I'm fascinated by her. I think she's an incredibly interesting character, because the thing about Helena is that, like, as we've seen with Mark and with Dylan and with Irving, there are a lot of intrinsic qualities but shared between the innies and the outies. So when we see Helly, this really wonderfully lovable character, this really interesting, cool, spunky, fucking smart, cool woman, I said cool twice because she's so cool, that's, for all intents and purposes, who Helena could have been if she didn't have her dad, like, making her into what she is.
Yeah, and the thing is, she desperately, like as she continues to observe Helly R's, like, life and experiences, and, like, literally, like see her while her body is occupied by Helly R's consciousness, she, like, tries to get that in so many, like, bizarre, overreaching, like, one really telling scene is when she goes and finds Mark's outie
at the Chinese
in the
place.
real world. Yeah, because that is like her being like, well, this is maybe my chance to see if this chemistry works on the outside. And it is something that, like, Mark's outie is, like, genuinely, like, disturbed and put off by because Helena Egan is a fucking freak.
I think Adam Scott described it as realizing, like, having Mark realize that he was sitting down at a table with the devil. And the thing that's so fun, like, interesting and almost heartbreaking about that scene is it's after the switch has been flipped back to Heliar inside, right? Like, in the severed floor. And so she knows that she'll never see any Mark again. And she'll never feel what it felt like to be adored by him again.
Yeah.
And so she's sort of, like, kind of pathetically grasping at this last little, like, possibility of feeling that again. It would be tragic if she weren't also so fucked up. It's tragic and she's fucked up.
Yeah, I think that's, like, one of the amazing things about this season when it comes to Lumen's, like, corporate hierarchy, and also their, like within itself, the sort of pseudo-religious cult hierarchy that they have. Is that so many people are, like, free agents because they're interpreting the will of their grander goal in so many, like, fascinating and disparate ways. And this includes, like, Helena, like, going off on her own and trying to find love. This includes, like, you know, Milchek trying to, like, find his own source of independence. This includes Milchek's replacement, Miss Huang, who is a new character this season, being just kind of following in the footsteps of who Cobell grew up to be, of, like, a student of
the fellowship.
Yeah.
The fellowship that they talked about. I was very interested in and fascinated by this particular season. Like, if we go back to the sort of workers analogy to, like, workers' rights, like, there's a lot of, especially in season 1, like, when Mark finds the book and is reading about your job needs you, not the other way around. That is, like, there's a lot of workers' rights stuff going on in the subtext and text of Severance. And the thing that I think is very, very interesting that I really like about season 2, one of the many things, is that it is expanding that upward to, like, investigate how members of the managerial class, even though they are benefiting from the system, are still also being harmed by it.
Yeah, like everybody
So
is
you
kind
have
of everybody is really
like
dependent on like what Lumen is going to do for
yes,
this future.
and
Like there is a sense that the world itself is kind of broken in some really, and I think like this is done visually in that everything is snowed out, like everything is bleak, we barely ever see people around. There is this feeling that like whatever Lumen is doing is the most important thing, but because it has to be to them, like it has to be the most important thing.
yeah, and I really loved specifically the character arcs for both Miss Cobell and for Harmony Cobell and for Mr. Milchick in this season in regards to that specific thing of like, even though they are perpetuating harm on behalf of the system, they are also being harmed by it.
Oh, absolutely. Like it happens to them both in like different ways,
Oh,
but
especially with Milchick, and obviously like as a very pale lady, I am not fully qualified to talk about the depths of this commentary, but so much of what Milchick deals with, especially at the hand of Drummond, is so like racially loaded.
yeah,
Like the way
yeah.
that he is criticized for being a man with a robust vocabulary who carries himself in a certain way and who clearly takes a lot of pride in the way he thinks and speaks and interacts with the world, being punished for that and basically told to dumb it down is like, so it's already fucked up, and it's extra fucked up like when you look at the context of like this white man in a leadership position, like in an authority position over him, being like, talk simpler, don't use so many big words, is so, it's so patronizing and nasty.
Yeah, well, it's. I think what's really interesting is that Kier is, or like the Kier sort of mythos and Lumen that like enforces it is on this bleeding edge between bizarre, irrational traditions like racial bigotry and like religious sacrifice, and
Goat
also
sacrifices.
literal goat sacrifices. Like that's what they were for from season 1 to this, and like it's like that's like one half of what's going on down there in Lumen, and the other half is like kicking and dragging the human spirit into an uncertain future that they believe that like their grander ideologies will, I don't know, like they think that they can make like a better human race, a human race free of sin, and the ways, their methods of doing it are so like interwoven and complex and bizarre. And while we do get to see what some of those are, there is also this sense of like it is dogma all the way down. No one actually really knows what they're like driving at, or if it'll like fix things. They're all slaves to their passions.
It's so funny. The world is just the way that it is. And things can be prescient without knowing they are, or they're not actually, not without knowing. It's the same thing as when people are like, The Simpsons predicted blank, and it's like, no, they commented on a societal problem that didn't get better.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
same thing is the case with something like Severance, right? Where I think it's hitting hard, especially I think like Squid Game. The Severance season 2 is released at a time where all of these themes feel more relevant than ever before. The idea of trying to build a meaningful life within the confines of oppression, the idea of these being beholden to this like really this fucked up system, all of these sort of, you know, the war of the self and the reclamation of power and who's in charge, all of these things really hit. And the aspect you're talking about, this sort of weird marriage of old age religious mysticism and like sci-fi cold corporatocracy, is reminding me of, I was just listening to a podcast, Robert Evans, host of Behind the Bastards, great podcast, he's also just a great journalist, great writer. I don't always agree with everything he says, but I think he's a really great leftist writer who has a lot of great thoughts on stuff. And he had a 4-part podcast episode on a cult that spun off of the rationalist movement. I don't know if you know what the rationalist movement is. It is essentially, and people are going to yell at me for boiling this down too much, but there's no fucking way to talk about it without boiling it down. There is this sort of movement of people in this sort of Silicon Valley tech space, using a lot of thought experiments like Rocco's Basilisk.
Oh no, yeah. Rocco's Basilisk, aka Pascal's Wager for atheists.
Yes. Well, the thing is that what they've done is they've sort of recreated Calvinist Christianity, but with like AI and technology as sort of the god. And it's and what you're seeing and what Lumen is in a lot of ways is the same thing. Like Lumen isn't a religion in the traditional sense. but here Egan is positioned as this deity. His principles are their Bible, and like it's this corporate religion that's using these principles about the soul and morality and is melding the technology with the mysticism. And it reminds me so much this toxicity of like of stuff that like is bred in like the rationalist movement, and it's just it feels unsettlingly timely to see those things woven together.
Yeah, because I think like this, like that what you're describing is so like it's so connected to the bigger problems that are going on in society right now. Obviously, yes. Severance is something like pretty specific. It's a pretty specific premise, but expanding out into this greater world and the people in control of it, you get this thing where like, you know, the sort of, I guess, liberal response to things would be, well, the machine is broken, we need to fix the machine. But the way that Severance is positing its world is that, no, the problem is that this machine was designed to cause pain. And the only difference between the, like, old guard who Lumen are, like, trying to replace and, like, the new future that they're going towards is that like they believe that the machine that causes us pain can also take us to space and like auto-generate all of our entertainment through AI. Like that is essentially the paradigm we're dealing with, is that like, no, the machine is working perfectly fine, and in fact it is it will liberate humanity from all of our sins, all of our sadness, all of our labor. You'll never have to think or make decisions ever again.
And funnily enough, Gus, both of those things are about using technology and the will of a select elect few to transcend humanity.
It's almost like free will is a bug in the system that needs to be corrected.
Yes, it's the idea that humanity is outmoded.
And like, like, it's one of those things where I think that this is especially interesting when we look at Harmony Cobell as a character and where she sits in all of this, because she buys into a lot of the baseline beliefs, at least in season 1 she did, but also the fact that a lot of her accomplishments as a person are being co-opted. Like, it feels like the people above her don't acknowledge her, but have gone mad with the power she gave them.
Yeah.
Like, in a way, and this is because for a creative project, I've been getting a little into Gnosticism, but in a way, like, Cobell is the sort of goddess archetype of, like, she emanated parts of the universe, like, by accident, but she has to kind of pay for it and be punished by it, because the being she created, the sort of, like, demiurge of it all, is both unaware of her, unappreciative of her, and is just going off and doing its own thing, like, you know, unaware of the damage it's doing to humanity. I'm not trying to, like, you know, like Jordan B. Peterson over here. Like, I think that a lot of the religious subtext is very much built into this show and is intentional.
No, I agree. No, you're right. It's reckoning with a lot of stuff beyond, like, the, you know, the surface, not surface level, but, like, the base metaphor.
Like, the motif of hell is used in many interesting ways across this season, and also, like, it carries over from the first season.
Also, this is related but unrelated. Helly gets a lot of fucking great lines in this show, and I loved her line when she gets to confront her dad, or her Audie's dad.
Yes.
And she says, your family created hell, like, but you're gonna burn in it. And I'm like, oh, that's so sick.
I think what's amazing is that, like, that could also be read as, what's so funny is that, like, well, you were quoting Adam Scott when you said Mark Scout meeting with Helena Egan was like sitting across the table from the devil. What's interesting is that, like, if we're to go off of that, and I again, this isn't all just like here's why the curtains are blue and everyone is Jesus in purgatory sort of thing, but
I know what you mean.
But like, you know, I think this makes in James Egan's eyes, Heliar is sort of like Lucifer pre-fall, of, like, you know, someone with fascinating ideas. In her. Yeah.
Well, there's this recurring idea that and it's true in a lot of ways. The innies are in a lot of ways very innocent, right? They're very untainted in a lot of ways. It's why Dylan's wife felt so strongly for him when she first was alone with him, because she was seeing a version of her husband as she knew him before, like, struggling to live in the world had like beaten him down.
Yes, absolutely.
Like
that.
It's why Gretchen is so compelling to me, because it was like, obviously, yes, technically it was cheating, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't blame her for a second, because it's like,
she fell in love with the man she married again.
so yes, exactly. It's her seeing the man she married as he was when they first fell in love. It's like, how could that not be affecting to her?
Yeah, like it's devastating and it's heartbreaking, and also like I think it's so fitting that like the meeting between James Egan and Helly is so important, not just like from a symbolic
Also,
thing.
to preempt some comments, it's worse, but his name is actually just James.
See, I thought it was that, but I also didn't want to sound stupid saying it. Okay, I'll say James from now on.
His name is James.
Okay. But yeah, James Egan and Helly meeting, I think it's like, apart from the symbolism, apart from the foreshadowing, what's really important about this, I think from a structural writing standpoint, is that this is why Helena is not coming back to the severed floor, because there is this interest from like the major antagonist in Helly specifically. So the Glasgow block and all of its implications were used earlier in the season to great effect, fantastic, but obviously the writers need a reason why they can't just do the same plot beat over again. And to me, the reason is because James wants to cultivate Helly into a better version of his daughter.
See, I can see that. I'll also posit that the other reason they couldn't do it again is because the jig was up.
Yes, yeah.
The jig was fucking up.
Yeah, the jig was definitely up throughout, like, this season in terms of, like, macrodata refinement. But I also think they're not going to attempt the Glasgow block in the sort of ensuing chaos of the potential plots of season 3, because I don't think that James actually loves his daughter enough to...
Oh, he doesn't.
Yeah, like, to even bring her back. Like, he's okay with this.
Here's the thing I'm going to say that's so horrible about that whole dynamic in a very interesting way, is we were just talking about this sort of thing where Helly seems to share these inherent traits with Helena. It's just Helena is the way she is because of how she was raised. And James has that line where he says, I thought I saw a Kier in her when she was younger, but it went away as he left her as she got older. And I'm like, yeah, as you fucking ruined her.
Yes, yeah, like with all your weird expectations, all your like eat the eggs this way, the like you have to inherit the company.
This is how she was.
Yeah.
When you hadn't beaten her down yet.
And
like,
I
the
think
same as Dylan used to have this like belief in himself and this light behind his eyes before he kept failing at stuff. It's like, before, when Helena was little, she was like Helly.
Well, I think that's the sort of disturbing nature of like the beast here, is that that Lumen and the like sort of Kier cult and the Egans, they all value innocence, but the real world kills it. At least the world that they've created and shaped. So they're trying to like sort of start over down here on the severed floor, and nowhere does this come to a head more than with all the stuff related to Gemma and Miss Casey this season.
Oh, well, and they also at the same time do not view innies as human beings, which is because that's the thing. It's not it's definitely not this binary of like, you know, the outies are like, you know, they've got so much sin and we don't like them, and the innies are innocent. It's like no, the innies are like blueprints and like guinea pigs and test subjects, lab rats, like even in a literal sense, refining humanity down to what the ideal version of it is. I know, the refinement. Oh, that made me go crazy. Yeah. Well, it's like what Helena says to Helly in season 1. I am a person, you are not. And which is horrible. But also, and then I love that contrasted with another banger Helly R line in season finale, which was, they give us half a life and they think we won't fight for it.
Yeah.
And that made me, I was hooting and hollering. I was going crazy.
There was this creeping sense of dread throughout the finale that we were nearing the point where they were just going to kind of, like Helly was saying, shut everybody off and start whatever the next phase of this whole thing would be. Where like, and you know, there's some commentary there about mass layoffs in the real world, but I think it's also one of those things where it's like, Lumen does not care how many like innies they are sacrificing and recreating in the like only the end result, no matter how far away it may be.
It's viewing those individual people as disposable.
One thing that I found was really entertaining, like in regards to that, is just the fact that they had a whole marching band department of innies for the completion
the fucking
of
music,
Cold
dance,
Harbor.
choreography, or whatever it was. Oh, choreography and merriments.
Yes,
CNN.
yes.
The fact that there's also a fucking the goat department.
Mammalians nurturable.
I cried a lot during the season finale, and one of the times I cried was Gwendolyn Christie's character refusing to give up one more goat.
Yeah.
Enough is enough is enough. You know, not to put too fine a point on it, but the metaphor coming back with apes together strong, but like, because like workers together, because you get all the workers unite shit in the finale because you had Gwendolyn Christie's character and Mark working together to take down Drummond when neither of them could have done it alone. And then you had another spit that made me cry when Milchick gets out of the bathroom and Dylan's there with the whole fucking marching band blocking the way.
Exactly. You might say that they have new marching orders.
Pretty good. But like Helly's speech, that speech she gave, oh my god. How long until it happens? It happened to our friends. How long until it happens to you? How long until you're next? Like, if they can do it to one of us, they'll do it to all of us. And then, of course, if they give us half a life and they think we won't fight for it. And that, I'm like, that gives me chills, man. That makes me...
I think this is why, like, you know, honestly, like, I'm really interested, like, just in a speculative sense of, like, how you would handle... like this many people who like cannot leave this building but also can't go missing because they're people that are valued on the outside. How does Kier and how does Lumen respond to this?
Drummond was ready and willing to murder Mark Scout.
Oh yeah, but that's one guy who
I guess that's one guy
was giving them trouble.
And especially what do you do when one of those people is fucking Helena Egan?
Exactly. Like, I think, like, there is so much potential that, like, the last, and it was like a double length episode, basically. The last, like, episode of this season, it
Can we talk about
everything?
Can we talk about, well, yes, everything, but can we talk about, we don't have time to talk about everything because we're coming up on an hour, but can we talk about how Gemma has been in hell for 2 years? And how she doesn't know that Mark is severed. She doesn't even really know what severance is, probably.
No.
And so from her perspective, her husband that she hasn't seen in 2 years rescued her, then shoved her through a door, and then turned around and went back to another woman.
Yeah. And like in the midst of all of that, because I have to give full props for how like insanely like in the premise and in its execution, the whole let's save Gemma heist is with Mark and Miss Casey and Gemma and Drummond getting up in the mix. Like, all this stuff was so well done. That could have been a standalone sci-fi movie.
Absolutely. Now, can I say something that has been bouncing around inside my skull, which is that the storyline between Mark and Gemma in the finale is Orpheus and Eurydice.
Yeah, it is. Oh my god, it really is.
And I can't stop thinking about it.
Except this time Orpheus stays in hell.
Yes.
Even to the point that it's because he looked back, but not at the woman, at Helly.
He looked back. Exactly. You fucking see my vision. Okay, because the husband, to collect the wife, descended into the depths of hell.
Yeah.
And led her out to freedom, but he looked back, and now they're separated. And I can't stop thinking about how it's Orpheus and Eurydice, and obviously not identical because, like I said, there's twists on it, but like I couldn't stop thinking about that, looking at her being back in the world of the living, basically, and watching her husband remain in this, like, liminal place that she just escaped.
It's also, like, there's also this aspect of it that, like, really, like, affects me, and like I've been thinking a lot about this, and it's been like turning around in my head. And you know me, and you know some of my media opinions. The idea of like temporary selves that gain just enough awareness to know that they are inevitably going to be snuffed out. That's a big thing to me. And to just know that like Miss Casey and the 24 other like Gemma innies they're just gone is so, like, there's such a, like, profound tragedy to that, but you also know it couldn't have been any other way because Gemma's lived so much life that she needs, like, and she needs this.
Yes, and it's not... Gemma, unlike any of the other Audi combos, didn't consent to bring those innies into the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you could argue this both ways too, because the thing is, like, the innies, while their Audis consented to creating them, the innies didn't consent to being alive. And
no, it's true.
That's why, like, you know, the idea that they owe their Audis like ego death is so it's such a thorny issue that, like, of course the Audis would believe that, but why would the innies believe that it's like, nope, time to die?
I didn't predict the conversation between Mark Zinni and Audi, but as soon as it was happening, I was like, well, of course this wouldn't happen any other way. Of course, someone you don't know who put you in this position in the first place and is now expecting you to give up the only life you have. He's like, it's not much, but it's mine. We make it work. We find things that make us happy, and now you're asking me to give up all of that for you.
It shows that there is such a disconnect of, like, now hold on, like, Lumen just tells you sever and then you have, like, a career for life, but it's like, what if Lumen's evil? What if circumstances arise? Like, do we just, like, do the innies... In the effort of, like, dismantling Lumen and their whole operation, do the innies just not get a say, and should they just die for the new world that needs to be born? It's a question with, like, no right answers, but it's very fascinating, and I love where this, like, season interrogates it.
Yeah, and featuring, a real revelation that for Mark and a lot of the other Audis, they just never thought about it that hard and never really considered the fact that their innie is in fact a person.
And let's be real, like, because this show is so big and, like, its concepts are going to be so, to a lot of people, this might be the first big cable show they get into. This isn't something that the viewers were thinking about until the questions were posed to them. And that's not to say, audiences aren't thinking, they're not paying attention. It's that, how could we fathom something this terrifying until it's, like, staring us in the face? There are so many, like, inbuilt human thought processes that prevent us from acknowledging similar things. So, like,
the first few episodes of Severance, especially if you watch it like I did, I wish more people would have this experience because it's broken containment too much. But the fact that I got to watch the first few episodes of Severance without knowing what the premise of the show was, it was like experiencing a slow melting piece of fridge horror in real time. It was so, like, every new thing I reckoned with, where I was like, the innies never experience sleep. They are in a constant state of consciousness unless they take a nap at their desk. Like, things like that, little things. Like, they never experience sleep. Like, they never get to leave. They never get to do, they are essentially living the plot of No Exit, but with a job. Oh God, I'm still thinking about the birthing cabin.
The birthing cabin, and then, like, the idea that, like, you have an innie for getting on planes, you have an innie for, like, going to the dentist, you have an innie for, like, whatever your most traumatic memory is, there's an innie for that.
Creating a life, creating a whole consciousness whose only experience gets to be labor and giving birth to a child they never even get to hold. So fucking upsetting to me in a way that Black Mirror hasn't even begun to touch in, like, 3 seasons.
No, absolutely not. Because, like, it's so insane and insidious, like, the existence of these, like, splinter people, these, like, you know, these ways of, like, avoiding all pain.
God, that Gemma has an innie whose entire life is getting dental work.
Yes, and the fact that, like, in the finale, Gemma has an innie who, like, walked into a room, disassembled a crib, and then left to never exist again. Like, that is...
Yes.
Like, it's... I think what is fascinating about the implications of, like Cold Harbor and all the other files that they were doing is that this is, like, the beginning to a type of person that has never existed. The idea that if there is a way to make the chip, the severance process, filter out all these different traumas, what kind of human is that? Like, what kind of human has never experienced any of these. Like, what is Lumen create? They don't know. They're grasping at something because it feels grand and feels revolutionary, and it is in line with their mythos and religion. But they are essentially stripping people of the complexity of being a person.
Like I said, it's the belief that humanity as we know it is somehow outmoded, and that is inherently very frightening. Also, if Lumen can just disappear people, that's another level of of horror on top of it all.
I've seen people being like, oh, well, Mark might be unsure of whether to choose Helly or to choose Gemma, but Helly should have pushed Mark out that door if she truly loved and valued him. And I'm just like, I don't understand, like, why didn't you kill the man you loved? If you don't, that's cruelty. Like, what are we talking about?
Why didn't you rob the man you love of his agency?
Yeah, like, it's like one of those things of just like, his wife is up in heaven, might as well push him off this cliff. It's like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? It is okay for people to not feel that there is a clean right and wrong to this situation, and to feel this like nightmarish, like stomach churning, like, oh, what are they gonna do? Like, it's okay to feel that and not know who to root for and not know what the happy ending is. I think that's the point.
People want a hero and a villain so bad.
Yeah, exactly. But this show is it's gonna give you something more than that. It's gonna open your eyes to new possibilities. But yeah, Addison, you take it away. Yeah, please.
I want to ask if, first of all, just one moment. Pour one out for Harmony Cobell, who apparently started working in an ether factory when she was 8 years old. The thing about Cobell is that episode, her like backstory episode, essentially. Mm-hmm. Like, took me from, I still don't forgive her for any of the bad shit she did, but it was the fastest I've ever with a character gone, oh, that's why she's like that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I get it. Like, she could have never been normal.
I'm like, oh yeah, you never had a fucking chance, girl. I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
I want to speed run, toss at you some Severance fan theories I've seen and see how likely you believe them to be true on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yes, please.
Okay. Irving is not severed.
Dumb and impossible, I think, is what I'd put that one under. We've discussed why.
Yeah. We did. I just wanted to throw that one out there. Mark is the descendant of Dieter Egan.
Like, if so, who cares at this point? Like, yes. I would need more context for that to matter.
Gemma is the descendant of Dieter Egan.
Probably not, is what I'll say to that
Irving is a member of the Whole Mind Collective.
That we need more context to confirm or deny.
Mm-hmm. Helena is pregnant with Mark's baby.
I feel like we would have seen something in regards to that, but also, who knows? Season 3 can hold many secrets.
So true.
Like, I can see Helena also, like, concealing this fact from Jaime and everyone because she's, like, so, like, well, at least I'll have a part of innie Mark.
No, that's the thing, right?
But it's, and I also think that, like, this show has gone really dark already. I think that there is the potential for a very bizarre and interesting sort of dramatic beat of Helly dealing with the consequences of Helena getting them pregnant is very interesting.
I think final one, I guess, is they're trying to bring about the second coming of Kier.
Like, yes, but also, like, we don't know what that means is the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to say
but I believe that they believe that they could be wanting to do that.
I think it's I don't, by the way, put anything out of the possibility, but I do think it's very funny, the people who very insistent on Mark being a descendant of Dieter Egan, because I'm like, so we've got ourselves in another good old-fashioned incest plot line.
Oh my god.
If Mark is the descendant of Dieter Egan, then he and Helly are related.
Which is really, like, ew. I mean, maybe it's one of those things where it's just, like, the human population is just that small in this, like, snowed-out world. The snowpocalypse just killed that many people. I'll say
a personal theory that I have, which is that potentially the Whole Mind Collective has ties to Dieter Egan. Because someone pointed out that his name translates to... Like, I don't think it's as, like, simple as, like, oh, his descendants or whatever, but, like, maybe, he didn't turn into a tree. That's not true. That's bullshit. But the German name Dieter means army of the people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. into his introduction as a being at all. But that's just my own. If I'm gonna make fun of other people's fan theories, I feel like I should throw my own out there and let people roast me if they want to.
Okay, so here's one that I've adopted, and I know somebody else has said this somewhere, but I think that there's a possibility, is that I think because we've seen all the stuff they're doing with Gemma related to Severance, and like it's expanding the possibilities of what it could be, I think that Natalie is like, she's got a special kind of severed chip, which whenever she's speaking to the board, that's her innie, and when she's not, it's her outie.
Interesting. Oh, so she doesn't maybe retain stuff from the board. That's a very interesting idea. I don't know, but I do think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it would be an interesting sort of way that the board would conceal information. There's not a lot of proof for that, but I think it'd be an interesting sort of extra wrinkle to the character of Natalie.
We've never seen the board.
We have not. We like the highest ranking people we've seen are Jaime, Helena, Harmony Cobell,
Drummond,
and Drummond, who is gone. Like at this
Drummond
point.
dead.
Yeah, goodbye.
Drummond is dead. Harmony's been ousted from the company, which was a mistake because she kept fucking receipts.
Yeah, like Harmony Cobell is the reason why they ended up with like an Ocean's 25 situation on their hand.
She could also, if they wanted to, because Lord knows I'm a sucker for a redemption arc. If they wanted to give Harmony a redemption arc, she could, because she's the person who created the technology, be the person who cracks reintegration. It would be crazy, but I want to see it. Harmony Ragabi team up.
Yeah,
I want to see it.
Can I
as part of Harmony's redemption arc.
I also want to put across this is that like I've been seeing a lot, and maybe this is just because of like the Redditness of some of the places that I've been seeing stuff, but there's a lot of people who, you know, and I don't want to put a finger on why, but aren't a big fan of Ragabi's character. I don't, you know, there's something there.
Oh, I think I could put a finger on why.
Oh, sure. But we don't need to, you know, be gauche about it.
Are these the same people who thought that the Harmony-centric episode was boring, perhaps because they don't like spending that much time looking at a woman they don't want to fuck?
Yeah.
Who said that? Was it me?
But so here's the thing, is that I think that like over the course of this season, like there was this bizarre I don't get Ragabi. I don't get what she's trying to do. She seems crazy and unstable and weird.
And she seems crazy.
And I don't know that the writers know what they're doing with her. And it's like I got to the end of the season and I'm like, I don't know. It feels like this is all intentional, that Ragabi is a dangerous individual with a like with an unstable technology that's never been perfected.
I was going to say, if you were being hunted down by a global mega corporation, would you or would you not behave erratically?
I think that like there is literally like a group of people who like in their minds want much longer scenes with much more exposition, where character A goes through a like bullet pointed list of every possible connection that the viewer would want to know about, and the other character just refutes each one, so that we're left with like a scene that has the same outcome, but they've exhausted all the dialogue trees. Like we know that like Ragabi is still gonna flood the chip. We know that she is still gonna like leave when Devin gets involved. We know that she's not gonna tell Mark anything, and the same goes with like Miss Cobell and like saving the information for like when they needed to convince Mark to do the thing. Like, but you know, these people just want, but like these characters should be asking all the questions that we have, and it's not fair that these scenes don't take 20 minutes as they go through every possible permutation of speculation and bog down the runtime of the show, so that we can feel not cheated in some bizarre handholdy sense. It's weird.
Yeah.
They think that is their version of good writing, and I don't, that feels like bloated.
Good writing is when the characters turn toward the camera and tell me everything that's going on, and there is no tension, and there are no questions, and then the show is over. Good writing is a 30-minute video essay that just gives me a lore dump.
Oh yeah, my version of like good writing in Severance is it's the severed floor as you remember. It's the MDR team in the office, and there is just like an extra character off on the sidelines that just goes, "You are very smart. You are watching the smart show, and you are very smart, and nothing escapes your eagle eye. You are a smart person and a good poster, and this is an important thing you're doing with your life. You're so smart." I love you. That's good writing.
There was someone on Twitter who kind of crashed out early on in the Severance season 2 airing where they were like, oh, the show just reset the status quo. And at the time I was like, I'm willing to bet that's not going to end up being the case. And then the Helena reveal was the next episode. And I don't know this person personally, but if I did, I would like drive to their house, knock on their door, wait for them to open the door and go, yeah.
I also think it's really funny because, like, the idea of this show resetting its status quo is, like, I feel like we get that, and then, like, 2 minutes later, textually, you can see that that's not the case.
Like, maybe from from the first episode of season 2, you could be like, oh, weird, it's all kind of a lot more similar to the first season than I thought it would be. And I'm like, have you ever thought that maybe writers do things intentionally?
There's a technique here called burying the lead.
Have you ever thought that maybe... And that's not to say that, you know, again, all writers are infallible. I'll say this, to wrap us up, I really enjoyed the journey of season 2. It left me feeling like this is a creative team that I can trust to take me on an interesting narrative journey. And I'm excited to see what they do. And it better not take 3 fucking years again.
Yeah, and I think that in this case, I think that like what they've done with this season 2, and in comparison directly with season 1, I have a feeling that season 3 is itself going to be very distinct in tone, in plot, in texture, in character development from the 2 previous seasons, and that's good because that is a creative team who is creating an ongoing story and not trying to, like, play the hits too early.
I agree, and I think that's that on that.
Exactly. All right, so like, comment, and subscribe. Please enjoy all of the future videos equally, and we will see you...
in the Kier future.
In the Kier future! It was he! Oh...